1964. The Sandok Austral factory floor, Boksburg, east of Johannesburg. A small armoured car rolls off the assembly line and onto a concrete apron still wet from the overnight rain. 4 wheels, a steel hull barely taller than the men standing beside it, a turret carrying a 90mm gun that looks far too large for the chassis beneath it. The whole machine weighs 6 tons. A Bedford truck weighs more. It looked like a copy. It looked like a copy because it was a copy. Every rivet, every weld line, every angle of that turret traced directly back to a French design built 3,000 miles away in a Panhard factory outside Paris. South African engineers had taken someone else's blueprint, someone else's engine, someone else's gun, and built it again on African soil with African steel and African hands. The world dismissed it. The United Nations condemned the country that built it. Arms embargoes were designed specifically to stop machines like this from ever reaching a battlefield. It reached the battlefield anyway. Over the next 2 decades, this copied, sanctioned, internationally condemned armoured car would destroy more enemy armour than any other wheeled vehicle in the history of the African continent. It would kill Soviet-supplied tanks in Angola, burn armoured columns on the highways of southern Africa, and fight in more bush wars than any vehicle its designers ever imagined. It would equip armies across the continent long after the nation that built it had abandoned it. And in the most bitter irony of all, the French company whose design had been copied would eventually come back to South Africa, not to demand royalties, but to buy spare parts. Its designation was the Eland Mark VII. It was the weapon that proved a pariah state could arm itself, and the vehicle that turned the South African border war into a mechanized killing ground. To understand why the Eland existed, you need to understand the problem South Africa faced in the late 1950s. The country's standard armoured car was the Daimler Ferret, a World War II-era British scout vehicle armed with nothing heavier than a single machine gun. By 1958, spare parts from Britain were drying up. The Ferret's armour could stop rifle rounds and not much else. Its firepower was inadequate for anything beyond light reconnaissance, and South Africa's strategic planners had already concluded that the country's most likely future conflicts would not be conventional European-style tank warfare, but counterinsurgency, bush warfare, and expeditionary operations across vast distances of open terrain, where speed, range, and a big gun mattered more than heavy armour. The South African Defence Force evaluated 3 candidates: the British Alvis Saladin, a 6-wheeled armoured car with a 76mm gun; the French Panhard EBR, a heavy 8-wheeled reconnaissance vehicle; and the Panhard AML, a compact 4-wheeled car mounting either a 60mm mortar or a 90mm low-pressure cannon. The AML won. It was light enough to be air transported,